I'm Isabel Buckley, the artist behind Izzy's Art, and I'm very excited to be able to talk to you today about the different ways of creating an outline for you to draw with. Now, this is a very hotly debated topic amongst a lot of artists and other people, and I know there are people out there who think there is only one way of creating an outline when you're drawing or painting, and that is by doing it freehand. And I know that some people have been criticised for using other methods. Now, I just want to say right from the outset that I think you do what works for you. There is no right or wrong way. And you might feel more comfortable doing one way, and freehand drawing just might not be your thing yet, or it might not be something you want to do, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Being a professional artist, time is literally money for me. So when I do my pet portrait commissions, I like to use the tracing with the Lightbox method, which I'm going to talk to you about today, because this saves me time. I love freehand drawing, and on those occasions that I get time, then I will do it. But I have used all the other methods at some point or other, and I think they all have their own place. Now, today I'm going to talk to you about using a Lightbox. If you don't have a Lightbox, then don't worry, because I'm also going to talk to you about other methods that you can use, things that you've got around your house to help you. And also I'll be giving you some tips and tricks to help you generally when you're tracing and creating your outline. I hope you find it helpful. Okay, so first of all, let's just talk about tracing. When tracing a picture, I personally prefer to do it from a black and white image like this one. You do not have to, you can do it from a coloured picture. The reason that I like doing it from a black and white image is I just find it simplifies things down a bit. When tracing, I prefer just to create a simple outline of whatever it is I'm drawing, in this case a snow leopard, just to get the straightforward outline, and then to look at things like the position of the eyes, nose, mouth, ears, and in this case some of the main markings. With colour, I tend to get distracted and end up putting in more than perhaps I mean to. When tracing, I prefer to keep it quite simple. If you start tracing in every tiny detail, when you come to transfer it to your drawing paper and then you're trying to draw on it, either with your coloured pencils or graphite, I find I get very confused as to which bit is actually which. I find it much easier if I've just got a basic outline to add in the details as I go along with my drawing. So I've got my image. The next thing I need is some tracing paper. Now, you will find you can either buy tracing paper in a pad format, or you can buy it in a roll like this one. Now, I used to buy it in sheets of paper, but I found I got through them very quickly and ended up with lots of scraps left over that got wasted. So I switched over to buying these rolls of tracing paper. Now, I bought this one about a year ago for about £8, I think it was, and I still have absolutely loads of it left, so it does go a very long way. You will find that tracing paper comes in different weights. Now, this is a 63 gram weighted tracing paper, which is perfect for what we are trying to do at the moment. The larger the grams, the thicker the tracing paper, and of course the thicker the tracing paper, the harder it is to see through it. So this is perfect for what I want it for. I can see quite well through the paper to the picture underneath. Now, when you've got your piece of paper, make sure that you cut it big enough for your needs. What I mean by that is, for example, I'm drawing this clouded leopard here, I might not just be drawing the clouded leopard. I might want to include a background in the image, so in which case it would make sense for me to actually cut the paper bigger, so then I can draw the background in afterwards. Now, once you've got your tracing paper, you want to attach it to the paper underneath. This is so that it doesn't move, because it's very easy to do. Even if you think you're being really careful, it's very easy to accidentally shift slightly, and then it's quite hard sometimes to get it wiggled back into the right position. So when attaching it, I use masking tape, nice low tack option that you can peel off afterwards. You don't need to stick the entire thing down. What I prefer to do is to create like a hinge at the top. So I'm just going to put a piece there and a piece there. If you want to, you can add other pieces, particularly if it's slightly bendy. You can add other bits of masking tape on. The reason I don't stick the entire thing to the paper underneath is because I want to be able to carefully lift up the tracing paper if needs be to see the picture underneath. The reason you might do this is that there could be certain areas, for example around here, where it's not very clear in the picture with the tracing paper over the top, and you might just want to check what it actually looks like. And if you've got it hinged, it's very easy just to flick it over, have a look and think, oh yes, okay, I can see the leg coming down there, and then when you look back through, you've got an idea of what you're drawing, and the paper doesn't actually move. So once you've got that in place, you're ready to go. Now, you may remember doing tracing at school. With a pencil, you drew the outline of your image, flipped the paper over, went back over the lines that you'd drawn, turned the paper back again, and then scribbled over the top of your lines to transfer the image underneath. Now, that is one way of doing it, and there is no reason why you shouldn't. I personally prefer not to do it that way for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to cause too much indentation on my drawing paper underneath by kind of scribbling hard over the top. And also, I prefer to use a Lightbox and redraw it out, because then I have more control over the pencil marks on my drawing paper as to how much pressure I am applying and how heavy and how much I want the lines to actually show up. I will show you exactly what I mean by this as we go along. I'm just telling you this now for the simple reason that when I trace my image, I personally prefer to use a black fine liner. Now, the reason for this is when I use my Lightbox, as you will see in a minute, it becomes much easier to actually see the lines and what I'm drawing. The other reason I like to use the Lightbox is because it allows a backlight to shine through your image, and it actually makes it easier to see what it looks like. So let me show you what I actually mean. So my Lightbox is an A3 Lightbox. It was just a fairly cheap one off Amazon, nothing too expensive. I like it because it's thin and lightweight and easy to store. Also, it has 3 different brightness settings, which can be quite helpful, because then you can choose what level of light looks appropriate through your picture. So let me just show you what happens. So I've got the first setting, which makes it a little brighter, second setting, and then the third setting. Now you can see by having that light shining through, it really accentuates like the eyes to make them easy to see, and the leg and all these different areas. So I'll just leave it like that for a moment and I will show you. Now, using a fine liner, I personally like these Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pens. you want to either use an extra small or a small so that the line isn't too fat, or you can use any other make fine liner. I've got a Geo Collage pigment liner here, thin one, which works equally as well. It's just whatever you have to hand really, or whatever you prefer. So when tracing, like I said before, I just want to focus on the main outline and some of the key features. I'm not going to do all of it now, but I'll just give you a demonstration about how I would go about it. Okay, so I'm going to have a go at drawing some of the outline. Now, I like to start by starting right on the outside and just getting a general outline of the animal, or whatever it is I'm drawing. If you've got like here on the ear, the hair, it's not a solid line, so I might just do loose little lines there to indicate that it's there's some texture there, it's not smooth. And I'm going to mark in where the ear is, down the side of his face and the cheekbone, obviously, and then I'd continue that around the whole of the animal. And then I'd pick out some of the key features that I want to include. So the eye, very important. Getting that position of the eye is key. So just going to carefully draw the outline of the eye. You don't need to draw every detail because we can add that later, but just the main features and the highlight is quite helpful. Down his nose. Include the nose, that's another key feature. And the mouth. You may also want to, if you're drawing an animal, you may want to look at the direction of hair growth. So if you're adding in any of the markings, just think about which direction your pen is going in, because then when you come to draw it onto your drawing paper, you can have a bit of an idea then as to which way the hair is actually going. You might put a few of those in. I wouldn't go too mad and put them all in though, because otherwise when I come to do my drawing, it would just be too confusing. Or drawing the other eye. Just again, just the main features: pupil, highlight, outside, and the ears. Just get a rough idea of the ears. Now, in this bit here, I couldn't actually make out what it looked like. So this is where it's handy having it hinged, the tracing paper, because you can just flip it over, and I drew here onto the actual black and white image the outline bits that I couldn't see, and then when you flip your paper over, and because it's hinged it doesn't move, I can clearly see now where I drew that line underneath, which then allows me to draw it onto the drawing paper. Again, you can see here another example is this area here is there's not a lot of difference in the contrast, so it's quite hard to see. So you could flip it over, you could have a look, you might just be able to see without drawing, or you can just draw the outline with your pen, so when you put it back you can clearly see the pen mark that you have put on your paper. Okay, I'd work my way around. I would include some of these markings. Again, they're not solid outlines, just do them loosely like that, just to get an idea of where they are. Now, I just want to show you while we're doing this part what happens if you use a pencil. So while I can quite successfully draw onto my tracing paper using just a normal pencil to get the outline, what will happen is that the way I use a Lightbox, you won't be able to see the pencil very well. So if I just add a bit on here just so I can demonstrate to you. If you are using the method of tracing where you want to flip the paper over, like you did when you were at school, draw on the back of it, going over the lines you've drawn, flip it back to the front, put it on top of your drawing paper and then scribble, you can do. I personally prefer not to do it that way, because when you're scribbling like this over the top, it causes an indentation of your drawing paper if you're not careful. You also don't have the control on your line drawing as to how dark the line is, or being careful not to indent your paper. I prefer to have more control over what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take this off here. Using the masking tape means you can easily peel it off. I'm just going to put that to one side. Now I've got my drawing here. Now you can already see where I've used the black pen, you can see really clearly, and where I've used the pencil, it's not quite so dark. Now, when using a Lightbox, you want to put your drawing underneath your piece of paper. Now, obviously it depends. It depends on the thickness of your paper as to how easily it is to see through it. But when drawing, I like to use quite heavyweight paper. So I'm just going to pop that over the top for a moment just to show you. Now, because I've got the Lightbox light on very bright, it's really easy to see the black. I can see the pencil because I pressed fairly hard, but it's not as clear as the black. And if I had an even thicker paper than this particular one, then obviously seeing the pencil would become more difficult. If you have no light on, obviously you can't see through at all, which is where the Lightbox is useful. If you have it on light, you can just make it out. Depends how bright your Lightbox is, really, as to whether you can get away with drawing with a pencil or not. Now, what you want to do is to turn your paper over so you've got the back, and then decide where you want to position your drawing. Again, attach it with a couple of pieces of masking tape, like so. And because my tracing paper is quite curly, I'm going to just add a little bit at the bottom as well, just to keep it in place. And flip it over to the front. So, when drawing on your drawing paper, there are two things that you need to consider. Firstly is how heavy you want to draw your line, and secondly, it's about being careful not to indent your paper to damage it in any way. Now, I personally really like to use a hard pencil such as a H, and use a really light pressure so that I can barely see the line. This doesn't work for everybody. You may have poor eyesight, in which case you need to have a darker line to make it easier to see. In which case I wouldn't recommend using such a hard pencil, because you will be pressing harder and then causing an indentation into your paper, which when you come to work over it with coloured pencils or graphite, you will end up with a groove in your paper, and it makes it harder to fill. It's not so smooth. in which case I would recommend using a slightly softer pencil such as a 2B. Again, not everyone is able to work with such a light pressure, but just try and work lightly so that you don't indent the paper. I will show you what the difference is between the two of these. So the way that I personally like is I use this hard pencil very, very, very lightly. I'm barely touching the surface of the paper. And I'm just going to go over the top of my tracing. And I'll do this eye here. Basically, it's quite therapeutic really, just following the lines to transfer your image. Okay, and then now sometimes, obviously because the lines are so light, you can't necessarily remember where you've gone when the light's shining through, so in which case you can just turn off your Lightbox and you can check where you've been drawing. Now I'm just going to turn it back on again. This time I'm going to use a heavier sort of darker pencil. I've got a 2B. Again, I'm not going to press hard though, because I don't want to indent my paper, but if I draw my lines carefully with this one and this eye, then hopefully you'll be able to see the difference. Okay, so if I just turn that off a moment. Now, if you can see on the paper, you can see this eye a lot more clearly than this eye. Now, I can see this perfectly well for my drawing purposes. It's very easy for me to use a bit of putty rubber to erase that away. But if you feel the need, then obviously go for a softer pencil and make it a bit darker. It's better that you can actually see what you're drawing than not see what you're drawing. Just remember, the key thing is not to press hard with your pencil so that you don't indent your paper. Another little tip for you is when I've finished drawing my whole outline on here, I like to keep my tracing attached to the back of it. This is the other reason why it's good to have a piece of tracing paper that is as big as the picture that you are drawing. The reason I like to keep it on the back is if my lines, I end up rubbing them out and I didn't mean to, or they end up fading away a little bit, then it's very simple to do. I can just whack it back on my Lightbox, turn on the light, and then I can add that bit back in. If you haven't got the tracing attached to the back, then it's more of a faff trying to get it positioned in the right place so that you can draw it back in. The other reason I like it is actually it creates like an extra layer of cushioning between my drawing paper and my table, so that if there's any roughness on the table slightly, it just kind of gives it a bit more cushioning. And I personally just prefer having a slightly softer underlay to my drawing. Now you may be thinking, gosh, well, I don't actually have a Lightbox, but I really like this idea of having more control over my drawing onto my drawing paper. Well, then don't worry, there are other things you can do. If a Lightbox isn't something that you want to invest in, then it's not a problem. Another thing that you can do is to stick it to your window. So a great free way of creating some backlighting is to stick your outline and picture to a window and using the sunlight from outside. Just make sure that you find a big enough window to fit your piece of paper. The other option is to use a glass top table and shine a light from underneath it to create a light box that way. A couple of other suggestions for you are you can create your own light box by using a glass chopping board if you happen to have one, and just propping it up either side using some books or something similar and then shining a light from underneath. Or you could even use your glass shower unit if you happen to have really bright lighting in your bathroom, just to make sure obviously that you haven't just used the shower and it is nice and dry without the humidity in there. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and you've managed to get something out of it. Whether it's a method that you've tried before, maybe there were some extra little tips in there to help you, or maybe it's something completely new and you fancy just giving it a go. Next time, why don't you join me and I will be looking at how to use transfer paper such as Trace Down to create your outline. Bye for now.